Hello everyone, I'm Salamander, and today I'll be continuing my series reviewing all the female love interest routes. Today's gals all come from Sweet Enchantments. I was originally going to be reviewing the wives roughly in order of release, but I needed to make a change of plans, since I need to brush up on everything that happened in Altea and Mackenzie's routes before I try to competently review them. Sorry about that. Anyways, I will only be covering Runa, Liora, and Emeril today, as Nissa was added later on and her route is currently ongoing. Keep in mind that this series' plot revolves around an MC who adventures into a secret magical world by accident. With that, the MC has to learn a lot about magic and cope with their new circumstances. This series also primarily takes place in the cafe Sweet Enchantments, which doubles as a cafe and a criminal rehabilitation program. A lot of the plot revolves around various aspects of running a restaurant or working within one. It's like a magical coffee shop AU, but it's not an AU, and this isn't Wattpad. Anyways, on to the lovely ladies. Runa is a waitress at Sweet Enchantments, and like the majority of the other love interests, she is in the rehabilitation program due to crimes she committed prior to the events of her route. Runa's visual design is a mixed bag for me. She has short pink hair that is darker at the roots, lightening up at the tips. Her lips and eyes match this color, blending together really well and looking very good against her skin tone. She almost reminds me of a red wine, if that makes any sense at all. While I think she's visually appealing, especially in her working uniform, I don't really like many of her outfits other than that. Her breasts also look a bit off on her sprite, and that's an issue almost all of the female characters within this series have. I know it's a weird thing to mention, but it bothered me whenever they'd strip to their underwear. Runa is a character that has been very controversial. A lot of people stopped reading her route early in due to the confrontational nature and citing her to be unlikable. That isn't the only reason, as many people already know, but that's a bigger plot spoiler. Let us just say the issue of consent comes up and people really didn't like how it was handled. I think everyone looks at it less harshly in retrospect. Runa is a very hot-headed person. She has a very loud personality, and mixed with her often aggressive actions and sharp tongue, it makes her somewhat unique among the other female love interests. Despite this, Runa isn't angry all the time. There's much more to her character than her prickly outer layer, as becomes apparent as her route continues. I'd say late season 3 is when she becomes more likable. Prior to that, her softer side was often more or less fleeting and shown mostly in short glimpses. I will say I did in fact like that her hot-headed nature never went away. She got much better at handling it, but she would still often have outbursts, and she'd suffer the consequences of those outbursts. I thought this was a more realistic portrayal of someone's progress rather than just simply removing that part of her personality completely. Runa's route primarily revolves around an individual from her past for the first few seasons, changing to instead a story of her legal battle, and then her trying to enter university. I will say that I was disappointed with how the first story thread ended, as it felt unsatisfactory and weird. It was like there was a payoff, but it was implied it would continue on, and then it was hardly ever mentioned again. It could have been done better, but it didn't hinder my enjoyment of the route's later seasons. I think one of my biggest gripes in this route is the MC. I usually love the Sweet Enchantments MC, but she was insufferable during certain parts of the story. There were moments where she felt very selfish and not understanding of Runa's problems, and while that may be realistic for many people, I just found it tiring how she would handle it. I also got a weird feeling of the MC trying to fix Runa. I don't think it was intentional, but it just made me feel weird. Runa is still a very weird character for me. She isn't my type, like at all, but I found her personality growing on me by the end of her route. I wanted her to succeed and I wanted her to find happiness. While I'd still say she's one of my least favorite love interests, as a character in general I do like her a lot more than I did when I initially read her first 2 seasons. She was really funny in the other routes, so I think it's just one of those times where I like her as a character, just not as a love interest. Regardless, I do think her route is worth reading if you can get over the first 2 seasons. I've always said that Liora is the closest I'll ever get to a Queen Ashara route, and I don't say that for no good reason. She has a very similar vibe to Ashara, her wisdom being one of the most important character traits early on in her story. The things that drew me in about Ashara are all things Liora seems to have. Her aforementioned wisdom, her calm demeanor, the maturity you'd see from someone with her experiences. Hell, she founded and now runs Sweet Enchantments, a government-approved program to rehabilitate criminals. She really has a lot going on for her, and above all that, she's kind. She's always willing to lend a hand to anyone in need, and that's kind of her whole thing. She's a radiant person who draws people in with her warmth, and I find that to be very appealing. Liora is a visually beautiful character. Described by our MC as being stunning and ethereal, I'm inclined to agree. Her hair extends down past her shoulders, a milky silver color being exchanged with dark purple tips with blue undertones. She also has some of the best outfits in the series, specifically her undergarments. Sorry I keep talking about these ladies' underwear, but if you've seen hers, you'd understand me pointing them out. Liora's early seasons really center on her work with Sweet Enchantments. You see a glimpse of how exhausting her work can be and how much time and effort she puts in to make sure things all go right, especially where her employees are concerned. There's no doubt in my mind that Liora truly loves running Sweet Enchantments and that she finds helping others to be a worthwhile endeavor. It's to the point where she'll go nights without sleep just to ensure nothing goes wrong. You watch the MC slowly coax her into relaxing more and taking more time for herself. And you watch as Liora, a woman with so much on her plate, begins to find other things to care about. You watch Liora fall in love. Liora's route continues to deal with the hurdles thrown at the cafe, but also her relationship with our MC. The MC is a human in a magical society that tries to hide themselves from the human world, so obviously that causes issues across this whole series. More so than with the other routes, Liora has to deal with those human issues, possibly affecting the cafe and her employees. Some plot spoilers here skip to the time on screen to avoid them. After Liora realizes she's fallen hard for our MC and that she wants to fight for their relationship, she almost becomes willing to throw away everything she's worked for to be with the MC. Thankfully, she ends up being able to have both, but this whole aspect of the later seasons is my least favorite part about her route. Liora being so willing to give up the cafe for the MC feels somewhat inorganic. Like, it doesn't make sense that she'd just give it up. She worked for years to make the cafe work, and she cares so much for her employees. After all of that, her being so seemingly willing to toss it away to be with someone just seems unlikely, and very unlike the Liora we met in Season 1. It's not something I saw as being romantic either. Liora being willing to throw her life's work away strikes me as more sad than anything. I know it was supposed to be framed as a grand gesture of love, just to show our MC how much she's willing to give up, but it doesn't feel right. However, I think my favorite part of Liora's route is when all is said and done. All the hard work is over. Watching Liora's life become exponentially better and more calm is really nice, and it makes me feel happy for her. She deserves it. Liora deserves her happiness. I personally think that Liora is one of the best routes if you like the more mature and older love interests. She isn't quite as closed off as Medusa, nor does she have the baggage that Helena or Lorelei do. Liora's whole story is just a lot more calming, and because of all of this, she's absolutely worth your time. Emeril is a sweetheart. Everyone knows that. Even Runa loves the freckled Lolita. But Emeril's route goes out of its way to prove that, more than just being a sweet, innocent individual that many think can do no wrong, that she's a person with hopes, dreams, and her own motivation and autonomy. She's also the hostess of Sweet Enchantments and is usually the first person a customer would see. That makes her role and how well she does in it vital. Visually, Emeril is soft and cute. Big twin drills frame her freckled face, often accompanied by Lolita-styled fashion. When it isn't a frilly dress, it's still cute and fitting for her. The main plot thread revolves around Emeril's missing brother Marcel. It's hard to discuss anything about her plot without mentioning this, but I will be as vague as possible here because out of all of these routes, hers would be the best to go into totally blind. For that reason, I will focus much more on her as a character, but her growth is probably the most centric part of her route anyways. Emeril starts off being a bit more soft-spoken and meek than she ends up becoming. After meeting our MC, it becomes easier for her to take risks. She cites MC's presence as helping giving her strength, but that isn't to say she was ever weak. MC is what gave her the strength and motivation to renew her search for Marcel in full, as many others discouraged her from searching. Not because the others around her didn't care, but because they thought Emeril would be much better just moving on. But the ever-persistent Emeril wouldn't be swayed. No, despite so many barriers and so many people working against her, she continued on. I really enjoy how the MC helped to encourage Emeril in this route rather than fully push Emeril into action. Emeril was shown to already have a strong will, the MC just gave her that little bit of support that she needed. The MC isn't what made Emeril search for Marcel, but she encouraged Emeril to continue her search. Other stories that have more quiet or meek characters often make them the support, or another character forces them into action. So with Emeril, it's nice to see the MC's role being more support rather than her overshadowing Emeril. The balance was really well done here. I think Emeril's route showcases the strength in her perseverance more than anything. Again, I cannot do her route justice without majorly spoiling everything, so I cannot recommend enough that if you like mysteries, just to go ahead and read it. And that wraps up things for today. Apologies for the late upload, and the lack of visuals again. I was gonna add more, but my life again became kind of hectic, so I just figured I'd take it easy. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next month for more wife reviews. She almost becomes willing to throw away everything that she's worked so hard to be with. I wish I could read.